Hey everybody, welcome to today's virtual video lesson. So yesterday in class we talked about traits and features. Keep in mind, features are things that we are all inherently born with, or most of us, such as for humans, we could talk about 2 arms, 2 eyes, 1 nose, ears, hair, etc. But when we talk about the features of them, the traits, you can have different hair color, you can have different eye color, you can have different length of arms and legs, which would affect your height. You can have your ears be attached or unattached, and there are many other differences that we could talk about. But today we're going to look at generations and heredity. So offspring grow up to look pretty much like their parents. Since offspring develop to look like their parents, so this is passed on from one generation to the next. So we think about generations. You are one generation of your family. Your parents are another generation. Your grandparents are another generation, and your great-grandparents are another generation. So all of those are different generations, and they pass down your heredity through them. So this passing from one generation to the next is called heredity. You inherit genetic information from your biological parents, just as any offspring would inherit theirs from theirs. So you get yours from your parents, and they got theirs from their parents, and they got theirs from their parents. And that's how it goes pretty much for anything that reproduces sexually. So, pea plants. While looking at the pea plants, let's discuss how they are different from one another. Let's look at stem length, flower color. What can we label? Can we label traits and can we label features? So looking at our pea plants, we can see some features that they both have in common. Remember, pea plants, all pea plants will have these features. They both have a stem, the part that holds and supports it. They all have leaves. They have flowers. They are green. For this example, they are both in pots with soil. So those are the features of them. But when we talk about traits, remember, traits are the inherent differences between them. So the differences we can see, well, for starters, these flowers are purple and these ones are white. We can also notice the stem length is different. So this one has a shorter stem and this one has a longer stem. So those are the traits that are different from each other. So we're going to watch a quick video about Mendel. In his experiment, if we look at our pea plants, we talked today in class, if we mix these two, we crossbred them, what would the height be? So if we looked at a small plant and a large plant, what would the height be? That's what we're going to be looking at. That's what Mendel looked at.
Is known as genetics. Bigger or better, faster or stronger. But it wasn't until the 1860s that someone finally began to unravel the secret of how heredity really works. He was an Austrian monk named Gregor Mendel, and his amazing experiments with pea plants eventually changed the way people looked at themselves.
Mendel wondered how different plant traits, like stem height and seed shape and color, pass through generations. Altogether, the traits that you can see in an organism are called the phenotype. In people, traits like hair and eye color are part of a person's phenotype. And even though people can have many of the same traits, everyone's phenotype is unique. No two have all the same traits.
In one of his experiments, Mendel bred 2 tall pea plants, producing all tall offspring. And he bred 2 short pea plants, resulting in all short offspring.
Right, but when Mendel bred one of those new tall plants with one of the new short ones, guess what happened?
He got seeds that made medium-sized plants?
That's exactly what people thought back in Mendel's day. For example, it was thought that a tall parent and a short parent would make medium-sized kids. Seems logical, but no. In Mendel's experiment, the next generation of plants were all tall.
That's surprising.
Yep, and here's the most surprising thing. When those new tall plants were crossed, that's science speak for mated, and produced offspring, the next generation was a mixture of tall and short plants.
How'd that happen?
That's precisely what puzzled Mendel. Eventually, he came up with the theories which, to this day, are the basic principles of genetics. Mendel's first theory was that genes are inherited in pairs, one from each parent.
So one parent plant might contribute a tall gene, and the other plant a short gene?
Right. And remember that there are genes for all inherited traits, not just tall and short. All those genes together make up the genotype of an organism. Humans have about 30,000 gene pairs in their genotypes.
Whoa! Genotype? Phenotype? How can you keep them straight?
Just remember that genes make up the genotype, the total genetic makeup of an organism. But you can't see a genotype. It's just a set of instructions. Traits you can see or observe in some way make up the phenotype. Simple. Now, when Mendel bred a tall plant with a short plant, the offspring were all tall. But he knew that they had one gene from each parent plant, tall and short. This led to Mendel's second important theory, that the tall gene inherited from one parent was stronger than the short gene inherited from the other. Today, scientists call the stronger gene the dominant gene. The other half of the gene pair is known as the recessive gene. And since these genes produce traits, that means certain traits are dominant while others are recessive.
If both genes for a trait are the same.
So we looked at that experiment and we talked about, well, the focus of his investigation was to see what happens when I mix a tall and a short. And our vocab today, this is your homework to make sure we get put in our binder. Genotype is all the genes that make up an organism. So you can't see them. It's your genetic material. It's basically everything that makes you, you. And the phenotype is traits that you can observe about organisms. So, such as hair color, eye color, height, weight, skin color, what else? Nose, attached earlobes, unattached earlobes, things along that line are your phenotypes. So in his experiment, he started by looking at, okay, I breed a tall plant and a tall plant, and I get all talls. And then I breed a short and a short, and I get all shorts. And he wanted to see what would happen if I crossbreed a tall plant and a short plant. So when he did this, most people thought, okay, you put tall and short together, you're going to get medium. But in fact, what they figured out was when they mixed the tall and the short together, they got all talls. And if we're thinking about dominant and recessive genes, that means the tall gene is dominant. When we're looking at this picture, we also see F1 generation. This is the first generation. This is parents. This is the generation that they produced. And then he took it further. He looked at, okay, from these four that I created, from doing tall and short, I'm going to put the two talls together, and we're going to see what they produce. So he had the two talls crossbreed, and it ended up he had a tall, and a short. So there's no medium, but they did produce a short one, and that's the outlier. And we're talking about dominant genes. These are all the dominant, the tall. And this is the one recessive, the short. So that's what we looked at today in class. Make sure you get the vocab done right there. Have a wonderful day. I'll see you tomorrow. Bye.